Thank you, Deputy. We're ready. Okay, please be seated. Mr. Lyson, you may continue.
Thank you. Prior to the break, Ms. Loren, I think we were on our last image that had been admitted. That would be Exhibit 190. And you'd agree that is a photograph of the back seat from the driver's side?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, in addition to searching and photographing the vehicle, did you spend any time examining the apparent blood evidence in the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe what you did?
We have a chemical test that we use on stains that are visually consistent with blood. We take a small sample of the stain, add some chemicals to it, and if it turns pink, it indicates that blood is present. If it doesn't turn colors, we conclude that blood was not detected.
Did you identify certain locations and then swab them to obtain samples of that?
Yes, I did.
And could you explain what you do with those swabs once you collect them?
Once the swabs are collected, we package them in manila envelopes, seal them, put a barcode on them as an inventory, and then securely store them until they can go up to the DNA section.
When you collect a a swab of blood, do you assign the location where you collected that from with another specific number?
Yes, we use item numbers for that as well.
Okay. And do you take photographs that mark those locations so we can look back at images you took to identify specifically where you took samples of the blood in the car?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, the State offers Exhibits 191 to 198, photographs of blood samples taken from the vehicle.
Any objection to 191 to 198? Those exhibits will be admitted into evidence, and you may publish.
Okay. Now, Ms. Loren, you'd agree that essentially these 8 exhibits are in pairs. There are 2 photographs per 4 blood samples that you collected, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's look at the first blood sample. This would be starting with Exhibit 191. Could you describe the location of this blood sample?
This is on the front driver's seat,
Right.
item 22.
And you can see that it's item number 22 in the front driver's seat, yes.
Yes.
Okay, let's just look at Exhibit 192 now. And you agree that is just a close-up image of that item, that blood item number 22?
Yes.
Okay. Now Exhibit 193. What is shown here in Exhibit 193?
These are bloodstains on the front passenger dashboard marked as Area A.
Okay. Let us look now at Exhibit 194. Now, you said that was Area A, but is there a specific item number identified, a specific blood sample identified with a particular BCA lab item number?
Yes, one stain was collected from this area as item 25.
Okay. Exhibit 195. Okay, what area of the vehicle is shown here?
This is that passenger side headliner or ceiling of the vehicle marked as Area B.
Okay, now this image is from a slightly different perspective than we saw the headliner from the last image, correct?
Correct.
Would you agree that this image perhaps could have been taken by someone leaning down outside the passenger side door looking up at the ceiling of the car?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Exhibit 198. Strike that. 196. What is shown here, Ms. Loren?
This is a blood stain that was collected from that passenger side headliner as our item number 26.
Okay. Now Exhibit 197, Mr. Miller. You'd agree this is an image looking into the rear of the vehicle?
Correct.
Okay, let's go to Exhibit 198. This is zooming in on a particular blood sample, correct?
Yes.
And what item number is this?
This is our item number 27.
Okay. You take that down. Speaking of your lab generally, would you agree that the crime lab conducted some forensic testing of certain items as part of this investigation?
Yes, they did.
And some DNA testing did take place?
Yes.
And the item numbers assigned by you of those blood samples stayed with the swabs of those blood samples throughout the investigation?
Yes.
And the DNA testing was performed by your colleague, forensic scientist Eric Copen?
That is correct.
Okay. In addition to the DNA testing, am I correct that further testing at the BCA included examination and analysis of the firearm that we looked at today?
Yes.
And that examination was performed by another scientist in your lab, Travis Millard?
Correct.
Okay. And both Mr. Copen and Mr. Millard would be in a position to describe their work specifically, correct?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions at this time.
Any cross counsel?
Good morning, Ms. Wright.
Good morning.
It's Loren, do I have that right?
Loren.
Loren, thank you. Pauling is my name. I'm one of the lawyers for former Officer Potter. Earl Gray's with me, and Amanda Montgomery. I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
You were at the scene, and you've described a collection of a lot of evidence, which was your responsibility, correct?
Yes.
And you made a list of all the evidence that you collected, and they are reflected in reports that you authored, correct?
Yes.
And one of the pieces of evidence that you collected is labeled number 21 on your report, and it's denoted as, quotes, one plastic bag containing evidence classified as plant material. You remember collecting that, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And the plant material was taken from the driver's floor and the center console. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you did that, I assume, or one of your techs did that, right?
Yes.
And you found that the plant material was familiar in terms of its appearance, was it not?
Yes.
It was marijuana, at least visually, correct?
It appeared to be consistent with that, yes.
And then you also found another piece of evidence, number 24, and the type and packaging, according to your report, is one plastic bag containing evidence classified as an item of evidence. And you described number 24 as a, quotes, digital scale from the center console. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Sidebar.
The objection is sustained. The jury will disregard the question that was just asked. You may continue, Mr. Ing.
Ms. Loren, did you test the plant matter as a part of your lab process?
No, I did not.
Do you have any reason to believe that, given your experience with the BCA, that it was not marijuana?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'm going to let you answer. Go ahead.
I don't perform drug testing, but the visual appearance allowed me made me decide to collect it, yes.
Because you thought it was contraband?
It was plant material that looked familiar to me.
And as a part of your BCA process, you also took a blood sample from Officer Potter that evening, or had someone from a hospital do it. Is that correct?
A toxicology sample was submitted to me, yes,
And that was tested as well by the BCA, right?
by a different scientist. Yes.
And nothing was found in her blood. Is that correct?
I actually didn't review the toxicology results.
No further questions.
Is there anything further from the state?
State has no redirect.
No?
State has no redirect.
Okay. All right, you can step down. The state may call its next witness.
Your Honor, this time the state calls Agent Brent Peterson.
Hey, Agent, will you please come forward? Stand behind the witness chair and raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this cause?
Yes, I do.
Please have a
Thank you.
seat. Please remove your mask.
Thank you.
State your full name and spell it.
My first name is Brent, B-R-E-N-T. Last name is Peterson, P-E-T-E-R-S-E-N.
All right, couple things to keep in mind. When testifying, the court reporter is taking everything down. Only one person can talk at a time. Wait till the question's finished before you answer. Yes or no questions instead of shaking your head. No or uh-huhs. If an objection is made, stop talking immediately. Don't answer the question unless I tell you to. And if you don't understand the question, please ask for clarification.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Counsel?
Could you state your occupation for the record?
I'm a special agent for the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA.
How long have you been with the BCA?
5.5 years. I started in June of 2016.
What unit are you currently serving in?
I'm in our Force Investigations Unit.
Now, you're a licensed peace officer, correct?
Yes.
And you take continuing education courses to maintain that license?
Yes.
Prior to working for the BCA, did you have other law enforcement experience?
Yes.
Could you explain that experience to the jury?
From 2001 until 2005, I was a police officer for the University of Minnesota Police Department here in Minneapolis. And then from 2005 until 2016, I worked for the Rochester Police Department in Rochester, Minnesota, where I was a patrol officer, investigator, and a sergeant, a patrol supervisor.
You were promoted to a detective level as early as 2008, correct?
Correct.
In regard to the BCA, you arrived in 2016. Could you describe the roles that you've had working with the BCA?
Sure. Initially, I was hired to work in what's known as our predatory crimes section, which dealt with primarily child pornography, predatory offenders, human trafficking. In November approximately of 2016, I transferred to our homicide unit, or homicide section, here in the metro area.
In all of that experience, dating back to 2008 with Rochester, through all of your time in the BCA, that's all been investigative?
With the exception of 2 years, 2014 to June of 2016, where I was back on patrol as a sergeant with the Rochester Police Department.
Now, as part of your work in the Force Investigations Unit, you'd agree that you work on officer-involved shooting cases.
Yes.
Agent Phil has told the jury about your unit. I just want to know a little bit about your experience in that unit. In the 6 years you have been with the BCA, how many officer-involved shooting cases have you worked on?
I'm right up around 73 use of force investigations.
Okay, so use of force investigations, do all of those include fatalities?
No,
How many of those included fatalities?
I don't know.
Okay. How many of those cases have you been the lead agent on?
13.
And is there a role other than lead case agent which you have served in?
Yes.
And what is that?
Sometimes we have co-agents, co-lead agents. Other times it'll be something as simple as my only role will be to attend an autopsy or something like that.
In support in various ways.
In support, correct.
Okay. For example, in the case involving Kim Potter, what was your role?
In support of the case agent.
All right. I now want to talk about this case, April 11th of 2021. Do you recall that day?
Yes.
What were you doing?
I believe it was a Sunday, so I was at home and off duty.
Did you receive some information that prompted a response from you?
Yes.
And what was that information?
I was notified with other members of my team that there was an incident in Brooklyn Center for which we had been requested to investigate.
Okay. And would you agree that essentially that information prompted you to respond to 63rd and Catherine in Brooklyn Center to assist Agent Phil in the investigation of this case?
That's correct.
Okay. And would you agree you arrived at scene about 5 p.m.?
That's correct.
At the time of your arrival, was there any personnel from the BCA present?
Yes.
And would that include both Agent Phil and other members of the crime lab team and other agents from the BCA?
That's correct.
What actions did you take at the scene upon arrival?
When I got there, I parked outside of the perimeter that had been established. I met with Agent Phil, who is my supervisor, as well as with Melissa Loren, who is our crime scene team leader, and just kind of information was a little vague at the time. I got there, but more was coming in. Just kind of got an overview of the scene. I made some observations of the scene also.
Yep. Did you spend any time attempting to find witnesses?
I did, yes.
And was one of the witnesses that you ultimately spoke to a Carrie Blansky, a neighbor?
Yes.
Did you later obtain a video evidence from Ms. Blansky?
Yes.
With regard to a vehicle that was at the scene, a white Buick, did you assist in towing that vehicle?
Yes.
And where did it get towed to?
BCA headquarters in St. Paul.
Okay. And do you remember how long you were at the scene?
Probably about 2 to 2.5 hours.
Okay. So you left perhaps around 7:30 p.m.?
That sounds right, yes.
All right. Now, in addition to the work that you've done in this case at the scene, or you did at the scene, did you gather additional evidence during the course of the investigation?
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk about some of those tasks, but not all. Do you recall continuing your work on the case on April 13th by going to the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
Why did you go to the medical examiner's office?
There were a few items that were available for us to pick up that we needed to get some of those submitted into our laboratory for further testing.
And did you pick up those items?
I did.
What were those items?
I picked up 5 items. One was what's called a blood on spot card. It's a DNA sample from the deceased. I pulled a projectile or bullet. I acquired fingernail clippings from each hand of the deceased, and then pulled head hairs, pulled hairs from the deceased.
Okay. And you agree that the blood sample or the blood spot was for another person to conduct DNA testing?
Yes.
Okay. And this fired bullet, that also was collected for subsequent testing?
Correct.
And am I correct that you transported these and inventoried these at the BCA?
Yes.
Okay. And were each of these individual items assigned an item number?
Yes.
And would you agree those items are just the 5 items you said, 29.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5?
That's correct.
Okay. And that blood DNA sample, that was the one that you identified as 29.1?
Correct.
And the bullet that you recovered, that was identified as 29.2?
Correct.
And are you aware that that blood sample or that spot was later issued a separate BCA lab item number as item 30?
Yeah. Yes.
And that fired bullet was issued a separate BCA lab item number 31?
Yes.
All right. When you collected that fired bullet, you know that it is now affixed with both your item number 29.2 and the BCA lab number 31, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. At this time, the state offers Exhibit 201.
Objection to 201.
No objection.
Exhibit 201 will be admitted.
Agent Peterson, I'm showing you Exhibit 201. Would you recognize this as the fired bullet you collected from the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
You're on permission to publish this item on the Elmo.
Email.
Oh. Now, Agent Peterson, did you have an opportunity to look at this fired bullet?
At the time of my collecting the item,
No, I'm sorry. Recently, as it appears to you here.
yes, recently I had.
Okay. And did it have, were you able to identify the type of ammunition it is based on your inspection?
Yeah, that appears to be hollow point ammunition.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with hollow point ammunition, given your experience in law enforcement?
Yes.
And are you familiar with what happens when hollow point ammunition hits an object?
Yes.
And what happens?
Generally, it's designed to, the term is mushroom or kind of fold out like you see it appears. And that is to slow the velocity of it as it hits an object, and also it creates kind of a larger wound path and can cause more damage to tissue and organs in a person.
Because what you're saying is when it's designed to slow down, it's actually designed to use the body as drag to slow down.
Right, yes.
And I'd like to turn your attention back to the morning of April 12th. Did you learn that the BCA had received some video evidence regarding this case?
Yes.
And what video evidence, did you review some of that video evidence?
Yes.
What video evidence have you reviewed?
I reviewed body-worn camera video from Officer Potter, Officer Lucky, and Sergeant Johnson.
Okay. Did you also review a squad video?
Yes, the squad video from Officer Lucky's and Officer Potter's squad car.
And did you review the time frame which captured the incident we're all here for today?
Yes.
And you ultimately wrote some reports about your review of those materials, correct?
Correct.
In preparation for trial, did you examine those videos, particularly specific moments or stills of those videos?
Yes.
And those still images isolated specific moments which attracted your attention, am I correct?
Correct.
And when you reviewed those still images, were they fair and accurate sort of excerpts or taken from the videos that we've seen here in trial?
Yes.
Pardon me, that you have reviewed?
That I've reviewed, yes.
Okay, I now want to go through a series of still images. First, I want to direct your attention to a particular moment as the defendant approaches Daunte Wright's vehicle. Do you recall seeing a moment shown on the squad video which attracted your attention?
Yes.
Okay. What did you perceive occurring at that moment which attracted your attention?
We objected this and it to be heard.
Yes. All right, the objection is overruled. The counsel may continue.
Your Honor, quick, one
Oh, members of the jury, we're just going to take a short 15-minute break, okay? So, have a good break. Okay, you may step down. Sidebar, please.